He told me I couldn't walk my granddaughter down the school hall anymore because you're just embarrassing her with your shaky hands and cheap clothes. My daughter laughed and said, "It's not a big deal, Dad. You're old." But the day I showed up with the original house deed and a legal file she didn't know existed, her smile faded as I said, "I'm 74. I live in St. Charles, Missouri, and I've lived in the same area my whole life. I'm not rich. I'm not fancy. I worked in construction since I was 19, swinging hammers, pouring concrete, hauling lumber. I built homes that people still live in today, and I did it with pride. My wife passed away when our daughter Ellie was just 5. I raised her by myself. Every scraped knee, every spelling bee, every birthday, I was there. She didn't grow up with luxury, but she had stability. I made sure of that. I bought our house in 1984 with cash and sweat. I remember putting the roof on it in the middle of July, sweat pouring down my back. I built it strong. That house has stood through storms, floods, and worse. I kept the deed in a fireproof box with every other important thing I've ever owned. When I got too old to keep up the big house, I moved into the guest house behind it. It's small, but it's enough for me. Ellie and her husband Dan moved into the main house about 6 years ago. They said it made sense. I agreed. I liked having them close. I loved hearing my granddaughter Maddie laugh and play in the yard. Every weekday, I'd walk Maddie to school. It was a 5-minute walk. She liked it. She'd talk about her projects, her friends, her teacher. I'd carry her backpack and hold her hand. My hands shake a little these days. Age does that to you. But Maddie never seemed to mind. Then one morning, everything changed. Dan was standing in the driveway when I got back. He had his arms crossed like he was about to fire someone. I asked him if something was wrong. He said, "We need to talk. About you walking Maddie to school." I frowned. "What about it?" He said, "She's growing up. It's starting to look awkward." I didn't understand. He went on. "I mean, you've got those shaky hands and the thrift store clothes. Other kids notice. Teachers too. You're embarrassing her." I just stared at him. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I said, "She never said that." He gave me a smug smile. "She doesn't have to. We're her parents. We know what's best." I turned and walked back to my place without saying another word. My heart felt like it had dropped through the floor. The next day, Ellie came over while I was having coffee. She said, "Dad, Dan talked to me. He's right. It's not a big deal. You're old. Let her go on her own." That word old cut deep. She didn't say it with love. She said it like I was a problem. Like I'd become an embarrassment to her too. I didn't argue. I just nodded. But something inside me changed. They thought I was weak. That I'd roll over, stay quiet, disappear like an old shirt no one wears anymore. But they forgot something important. That house. It was still mine. I never signed it over. I'd had a transfer agreement written up a few years back, when Ellie turned 40, but I never went through with it. I don't know why. Maybe I didn't fully trust Dan. Maybe I just wasn't ready. And I still paid the property taxes. I never told them that. They probably assumed it came out of some joint account. But the tax receipts were all in my name. I kept them, just in case. Well, this was just in case. I called my old buddy Walter, a real estate lawyer I worked with back in the 90s. He's retired now, but still sharp as hell. I showed him everything. The deed, the tax papers, the unsigned transfer agreement. He helped me get the paperwork in order. We didn't rush. We were careful. In the meantime, I kept my distance. I stopped walking Maddie to class. I stopped eating dinner with them. I let them think they'd won. Then last week, I showed up at the front door with a manila folder under my arm. Then opened the door, looking annoyed. "Can I help you?" Ellie was behind him on the couch, scrolling on her phone. "Hey, Dad. What's up?" I walked in without asking. I dropped the folder on the coffee table. "I have something to show you." They looked at each other like I was about to pull out a photo album. Dan chuckled. "This ought to be good." I opened the folder and pulled out the papers. "This is the deed to the house. Still in my name. Has been since 1984. Ellie's smile froze. Dan leaned forward. "What are you talking about?" I pulled out the tax statements. "I've been paying the property taxes too. You never asked. You never checked." Then I handed over the eviction notice. "You've got 30 days to move out." Ellie stood up. "You're serious? You're evicting your own daughter?" I looked her in the eye. "Yes. You disrespected me in my own home. You let your husband insult me. You called me old like it was something shameful. I built this place with my hands. I bled for it. And now you'll learn what happens when you treat people like trash. Dan stood up. You can't just. I can, I said. And I did. I turned and walked out. They stood there, stunned, not knowing what hit them. And it's not over yet. After I served them the eviction notice, things got tense. I mean real tense. Dan tried to act cool for the first couple of days, like it was some misunderstanding that would blow over. He even came by the guest house with a smug grin. We should talk about this like adults, he said. No need to ruin the family over one little conversation. I didn't say a word. Just closed the door in his face. The next day, Ellie came instead. She had Maddie with her, like a human shield. Dad, this is crazy, she said. You can't seriously want to kick us out. Where would we even go? I leaned against the door frame and looked at Maddie. Sweetheart, I said gently, do you want to go inside and get the cookies I left on the table? She looked at her mom, unsure. Ellie nodded, and she went inside. Then I looked my daughter dead in the eye. I'm serious, I said. I meant what I said. 30 days. And I'll tell you right now, don't try anything behind my back. Her jaw tightened. You're really going to break up this family because Dan made one rude comment? No, I said. I'm doing this because you agreed with him. You laughed. You told me I was too old to matter. She crossed her arms. You know what? Fine. You want to play hardball? Let's play. Don't expect Maddie to visit anymore. That hit me hard, but I didn't show it. You can use your daughter as a weapon if you want. But just remember, when she's older and asks why you had to move, I'll have the paperwork ready. She stormed out. That weekend, Dan started pushing back. I got a letter from a lawyer, some friend of his, claiming I was unlawfully evicting tenants. Nice try. Walter and I had everything buttoned up. They weren't on any lease. They had no claim. They were just squatters with good furniture. Then the real dirty tricks started. First, my mailbox got smashed in. Then the trash cans went missing. Then someone poured sugar in my old truck's gas tank. I couldn't prove it was Dan, but I knew the timing wasn't a coincidence. So I got cameras. Put one on the garage, one on the back porch, one right above the mailbox. I called the police and filed a report. Dan smirked when they came to ask him a few questions, but the smirk faded fast when they told him any further incidents would result in charges. I wasn't playing anymore. Then came the biggest surprise. One evening, about 2 weeks in, I got a call from Maddie. She borrowed a neighbor's phone. Grandpa, she whispered, can I come over? My heart just about broke in two. I told her yes, of course. She showed up 10 minutes later, out of breath, holding her favorite stuffed rabbit. She said her mom and dad had been fighting a lot lately. Said Dan threw a plate. Said Ellie cried in the bathroom. She didn't want to be there. So I let her stay. I called Ellie and told her Maddie was with me and she was safe. She cursed me out. Said I had no right. I told her, when you act like a parent again, we can talk. That night, Maddie curled up on my couch and fell asleep holding my hand. The same shaky hand Dan said made me look weak. I sat there for hours, watching her breathe, thinking about all the things I'd done for my family and how they turned on me the second I wasn't useful to them. They thought I was finished. But I was just getting started. A few days after Maddie stayed with me, I got served. Not a letter. Not a warning. An official custody petition. Ellie and Dan were trying to file for temporary emergency custody of Maddie against me. They were claiming I was mentally unfit, potentially dangerous, and creating an unstable environment. The papers even said Maddie was being manipulated emotionally by a man who refuses to acknowledge his decline. I didn't know whether to laugh or throw something. They were going after my granddaughter to punish me. I called Walter again. He got me in touch with a family lawyer he trusted. The man didn't waste words. He said, they're not playing. They're trying to ruin your credibility so they can come out of this clean. You need to fight back. So I did. We gathered evidence. Those camera videos, the voicemail Ellie accidentally left on my answering machine where she called me a pathetic old man. And more importantly, we had Maddie's testimony. Because the next day, the family court judge ordered an interview with her. She told the truth. All of it. How Dan yelled and threw things. How her mom blamed her when she cried. How I listened, made her breakfast, and helped with her homework. The court didn't grant them emergency custody. But it didn't end there. A week before the eviction deadline, Ellie tried one last move. She threw a fake going-away party. I saw neighbors I hadn't spoken to in years suddenly drop by the front lawn with casseroles and cupcakes. She told everyone I was senile and didn't understand what he was doing, and that they were helping me by staying close. One woman even walked up to me and said, "It's so sad, Earl. We all know you're not yourself anymore." I told her, calmly, "The man you think is losing it is the one holding the deed in his hand. Don't forget that." Ellie was furious I showed up to the party at all. But I didn't care. What she didn't know was that Dan had already made a mess of their finances. In the eviction process, when we did a formal review of unpaid utility bills and household expenses, I found out they were 4 months behind on multiple accounts. The whole time they lived in my house rent-free, they were also racking up debts in my name. Because at some point, without asking me, Dan used my old Social Security number to open a new credit card for emergency renovations. That was the last straw. I filed a fraud report. Then I called the police. And suddenly, Dan wasn't so smug anymore. The cops didn't arrest him on the spot, but they started an investigation. Enough that Dan finally stopped showing his face. He even packed up early and moved in with his brother. Ellie, though, she stayed. She spent the final days crying and trying to guilt me. Said she had nowhere to go. Said Maddie needed her. I reminded her. Maddie needed a mother, not someone who used her as a pawn. And she sure didn't need to see her grandpa treated like garbage in his own home. The day before the deadline, Ellie made one last plea. She stood on my porch and said, "You're going to regret this. I'm still your daughter." I said, "You stopped acting like one a long time ago." Ellie moved out the next day. She didn't even say goodbye. Just loaded the last of her stuff into her beat-up SUV and peeled out of the driveway like a teenager. Maddie wasn't with her. She was still at my place, asleep on the couch. I didn't wake her. For the first time in months, the main house sat silent. No more yelling. No more slammed doors. No more late-night arguments pouring through the windows. It was quiet, and I finally breathed again. The fraud investigation moved quickly once I handed over the credit card statements, the Social Security number misuse, and some emails I found on a shared laptop where Dan bragged about fixing my finances. He didn't just commit fraud. He tried to refinance my house using my identity. That was the nail in his coffin. Dan got charged with fraud and identity theft. The prosecutor offered him a plea deal, but it still came with a record and 2 years probation. The bank canceled the loan, and I got a letter apologizing for not verifying the paperwork more carefully. But it wasn't just about the legal win. It was about making them feel what I'd felt. I made sure Ellie couldn't touch a dime of my estate. I updated the will. Everything goes to Maddie, held in trust until she's 25. No early withdrawals. No parental access. I even gave Walter full oversight as trustee. I also sold the main house. Yeah, the one I built. I put it on the market and sold it to a young couple from out of town. Teachers. Newlyweds. They cried when they saw the kitchen island. Said it reminded them of the house they grew up in. That's when I knew I was doing the right thing. I used part of the sale money to buy a small condo across town. Nothing fancy. Just a 1-bedroom with a decent porch and good morning sun. Perfect for me and Maddie when she visits. I took the rest of the money and put it into an education fund. For Maddie. Private school, college, trade school, whatever she wants. She earned it. I didn't tell Ellie I sold the house. She found out when she came by a few weeks later with a friend and saw a moving truck in the driveway. She came storming up to me like she hadn't just vanished for a month. "What are you doing?" I looked her dead in the eye. "Finishing what you started." She tried to cry. Said she was sorry. Said she didn't mean it. Said Dan had turned her against me. I listened. But I didn't believe her. She chose him. She laughed in my face. She watched me get pushed out of my own granddaughter's life and did nothing. That kind of damage doesn't just wash away. I told her, "I'll always be your father, but I'm not your safety net anymore." Then I handed her an envelope. Inside was a copy of the eviction, the fraud report, the final will update, and a printed out photo of the for sale sign in front of the house. She didn't open it. She just stood there shaking while the new homeowners pulled into the driveway and waved at me. I waved back. Maddie still visits every weekend. We make pancakes, walk in the park, and talk about her dreams. She says she wants to be an engineer, or maybe a vet, or maybe both. She doesn't ask about her dad. She doesn't talk about her mom much, either. But sometimes she asks me why people change, and I tell her the truth. People show you who they are when they think you can't do anything about it. But I could, and I did. Revenge doesn't always come loud. Sometimes it's just silence where the yelling used to be. Sometimes it's a little girl smiling while she does her homework at your kitchen table. And sometimes, it's walking through the front door of your new home with peace in your heart, while the people who hurt you watch it all slip through their fingers.